I've spoken a lot over time about the job of an MP, what they actually do in that place and what we expect of them in return. Very recently we saw the defection or move of Lee Anderson to Reform. So it's a third party he's joined up with in as many years. Started off as a Labour councillor, left Labour when they barracked him for trying to stop a traveller encampment being set up, and then jumped to the Tories, and now here he is. Across the floor there was a picture of him sat with George Galloway, listening intently to what was going on the back benches. I suppose that's where they'll end up. You know, to me, the job of an MP should be a very important one. There's, what, 65, 70 million people in this country, or countries, if we get it correct, all of which need a voice, all of which need to be heard. So, as you all know, I'm teaching you to suck eggs here, we have a general election every 4 years, sometimes 5, to vote for a representative to be our voice in that house, the House of Commons up there by the river, uptown as they call it. Well, we've realised that it's not that simple. A lot of MPs, when you write to them or where you try and communicate with them, I'll go on record and say mine's an exception, you do actually get a reply when you write to him, ignore you, don't acknowledge you, and won't go anywhere with your legitimate concerns. Yet somehow they get in again and again and again. I don't think it's true of all MPs though. I mean, some do go in there with honourable intentions, but at the end of the day, as the saying goes, absolute power corrupts absolutely. You get a taste of it, the authority, the meaning, and a possible lucrative career afterwards, and boom, they've lost it. No longer that voice representing you in your house. You know, the salaries of these people, 80-odd thousand quid a year, plus expenses. Not bad screw, is it? Well, a lot of them now seem to be very scared of what's going to happen next. As I said in the previous video about division being sown by certain members when they pull out the racist card, it's been allowed to go on for far too long, and then you find a series of measures of appeasement trying to keep those in check, and the likes of me and you and whoever else that have lived here all along and tried our best to work hard and improve our lives get victimised and vilified if we step out of line. It's a fact. So in my mind, they no longer represent me. They no longer represent my interests in the House. You know, MPs weren't always paid. I bet you didn't know that. I'll ask you a question. What year do you think MPs started receiving a salary? And what party pushed for this to happen? Again, I didn't know. Somebody told me and I did a bit more research. Answers a fair bit. I'll give you a clue, it's in the 20th century, earlier on. Up until that point in time, MPs were there unpaid, and it was assumed and considered that they had a reasonable background financially so they could support themselves while they were in the House. So you could imagine that, couldn't you? A situation where you have genuine people in the House wanting to do good, and there was no financial incentive, at least at first. no corruption, no backhanders. Sounds ideal, doesn't it? And all of a sudden they get a salary. 1911, by the way. Most of them were paid £400 a year. And if you look at the average salaries from about that time, about 70 quid. So they were always treated above and beyond everyone else. You could argue that it's a big job. So what happens now? As I've said, we're buggered really. The Tories have made a complete and utter haulings to the whole thing. And we're going to end up with a Labour government, whether we like it or not. Now I will sit on camera till I'm blue in the face and I will say, no. There's more to this life than just blues and reds. We have to get out there in our numbers and we have to show them this. Either vote for an alternative or do not consent. We cannot sit at home and do nothing, because you'll end up giving them tacit agreement to do what they like. And again, I mentioned David Cameron and Nick Clegg, the beginning of 14 years of disaster. You can see what happened there. So we need reform. We need a different way of doing things. We need a different way of being represented. We need fresh blood, fresh faces. We need a new party made up of community leaders who actually come from the areas they're supposed to represent. We need business people. We need normal folk with half an idea of what goes on in the outside world beyond the Westminster bubble. What concerns me very much is the fact that the likes of the leader of the Reform Party seem to be very intent on filling their ranks with rank and file establishment MPs. And, you know, George Galloway, what he came out with, claims he has evidence that he was approached. I'd love to see that. If you fill the ranks of the Reform Party, we'll use them as an example because the mainstream media seem to be talking about them more, then they become Tory light, Labour light even, an escape mechanism for establishment MPs. Therefore, there's no real reform at all. I hope that somebody somewhere actually sees this happening and puts preventative measures in place to ensure that reform is exactly what it's set out to be. The reformation, or the beginning again of our system of government, back to the days where we are represented by somebody in that house and they'll actually do something about it, do something for us and represent our voices. Will that day ever come? Let me know what you think in the comments. As always, subscribe to the channel, share the hell out of my stuff. I look forward to talking to you again soon. Toodaloo.